This week on Forever Spinning, we take a look at Atlanta's craziest hip-hop duo as we dive into Outkast ATLiens. Perfect! After the release of their debut album, Southern Playlist ATLiens Music, that is extremely tough to say, Outkast had proven themselves to be worthy of being in the rap game. The record was a hit, gaining tons of radio airplay in a time where Southern music was looked down upon. Instead of trying to play into the popularity of the West Coast or East Coast scenes, Outkast were ready to represent the South to the fullest. After all, to quote Andre 3000's mission statement, the South got something to say. So the dynamic duo hopped back in the studio and began writing their sophomore effort, ATLiens. Now, the time between Southern Playlist ATLiens Music and ATLiens, a lot had changed for both Big Boi and Andre 3000. Big Boi had his first child, and he took that responsibility incredibly seriously, while 3 Stacks decided to go completely sober in order to find his greatest inner self. Each member had a new outlook on life, and that shows in the music that they made on ATLiens. They were easily the odd ones out, not just because of the fact that they're from the South, but because of their unique personas. But Big Boi and Andre were able to channel their different outlooks on life in order to craft one of the most iconic hip-hop albums of all time, as well as solidifying themselves as one of the greatest groups in hip-hop history. They set out to the studio, this time with the mindset of producing some of their own tracks, something they really hadn't done too much before. And between the producing powers of both Outkast and Organized Noise, they were able to create an album that is set in its own dark alternate world. It might not have been the Atlanta sound, but it was most definitely the Outkast sound. Even down to the comic book stylized front cover of the album, Outkast owned their personality. The cover art though was almost trash, as artist Frank Gomez had completely butchered Big Boi's face. In a last minute attempt to salvage the cover, Gomez decided to draw an Atlanta Braves hat on Big Boi's head in order to cover his face, thus saving the cover. And let's be real, what would ATLiens be without this incredibly iconic cover? Outkast frequented many different studios throughout the recording of ATLiens, most of which were located in Atlanta or New York City. After whittling down the original 35 tracks to the 14 tracks that are featured on ATLiens, the record was eventually released on August 27th, 1996 on LaFace Records. The first single to be released alongside of ATLiens would be Elevator's Me and You, which was released on July 9th, 1996. The song talks about Outkast's meager upbringing, as well as their rise to stardom after the release of their debut album, and it actually features production by Outkast. But before Elevator's release, LaFace Records had their doubts about the song. They said they didn't even want Outkast to play it on the radio, let alone put it out as a single. Big Boi and Andre, against LaFace's wishes, decided to head down to the radio station themselves and hand in the song to be played on the radio. Elevators became Outkast's highest charting single at number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100, that is, of course, until they would release Miss Jackson in 2000, which would go number 1. After all this, LaFace decided that it was in the best interest of both the label and Outkast that Outkast would be able to pick all of their singles from that point forward. I would definitely call that a great move on LaFace's part. The next single from this record is actually the title track, ATLiens, which was released on August 17th, 1996. Yet another single that was produced by Outkast. This song features this incredible beat that is a wonderful mixture of these grimy trap percussions and these otherworldly sounds of space that just give this song so much character. And the lyrics to ATLiens are all about, well, the real ATLiens of Atlanta. Big Boi and Andre both take turns talking about the fears that they have for the future of Atlanta, as well as talking about all the good things that they have done for Southern rap. It's a mix between humbling and braggadocious all rolled into one with this absolutely badass hook. ATLiens would peak at number 35 on the Billboard Hot 100. The final single to come off of ATLiens is Jazzy Belle, which was released on December 19th, 1996. This track was the only single from this album to be produced by Organized Noise. The lyrics of this track talk about Andre and Big Boi's concerns over the promiscuity of women during their time and the impact that it will have on the world in a negative way. But this song was actually never meant to be a single, as Big Boi did not like the production that Organized Noise had done on the song. However, Andre insisted on it being a single. So much so that after an argument between them, Andre allegedly talked some sense into Big Boi and convinced him that the song should be a single. However, in reality, Andre Andre's way of talking some sense into Big Boy was actually just paying him an undisclosed amount of money in order to have him sign off on Jazzy Belle becoming a single. Jazzy Belle would end up peaking at number 52 on the Billboard Hot 100. Outkast absolutely paved the way for so many artists during their time together. And to me, ATLiens is one of, if not the best possible representation of their achievements. The bond they show on this record is incredible as they constantly pick up after one another. They act like a well-oiled machine that constantly knows the moves of the next person. But then you hear a story about how Andre had to bribe Big Boy in order to get Jazzy Belle to become a single, and you kind of begin to see a shift between the two. Sure, it was very early on in their career when this happened, and they wouldn't split for years, but it kind of makes you think. As incredible as they were together, I'm sure they had their struggles. Like they say, opposites attract. And I'm sure that Big Boy and Andre had a ton in common. Obviously, they were best friends who were just destined to make music together, but I'm sure they had a ton of differences. I know that eventually they would have to get two separate tour buses, one that was a smoking bus and one that was not, due to Andre's decision to go completely sober. But despite all of this, Outkast were still able to come together at a time and create one of the greatest Southern hip-hop records ever, as well as being an influential force on budding artists during that time, not to mention for generations to come. Not only because of their creativity, but also because of their commitment to their own craft, no matter what other people said, whether it be their own label or the country as a whole. They might not have been a DIY project, especially considering they did have a major label representing them, but they did apply themselves in a very I'm gonna do what I want kind of way. They did business as they saw fit. To me, ATLiens is one of the greatest examples of just sticking to your guns and making things work for you. And in Outkast's case, that was making an album that they believed in even when others didn't. So, whether you've never heard this album before, or if it is one of your personal favorites, Outkast ATLiens will always be forever spinning. Thanks for watching.